The Black Mafia Family was a big drug trafficking and money laundering organization in the U.S. It was founded the year of 1989 by two brothers by the name of Demetrius Flannery, aka Big Meech, and his brother Terry, aka Southwest E, and was founded in Detroit. From 1989 to the 2000s they had managed to establish a drug business so big, sales went through all of the United States, through their Los Angeles-based drug source with direct link to the Mexican cartels. The BMF had two bases, with the first one being in Atlanta, and run by Big Meech, and Southwest E running things in Los Angeles, who handled the shipments coming from Mexico to the States. To the public eye, the Black Mafia Family was known as an entertainment company, and used it as their front for the public eye, running a successful drug business from behind the scenes. Big Meech, in the early 2000s, decided to enter the music business, as BMF Entertainment, as a front so that they could launder the drug money off cocaine, and to basically turn legitimate. BMF Entertainment worked with a lot of high-profile hip-hop stars, such as Young Jeezy, and Fabulous, and worked as a record label for Blue Da Vinci. BMF Entertainment became very famous, not only for the music but the extravagant lifestyle it displayed to the public eye. The founders, as mentioned, are the Flannery brothers. Big Meech is the older brother, born on June 21, 1968 in Cleveland, Ohio, and Terry, the younger brother, was born 4 years later, January 10, 1972 in Detroit, Michigan. They started selling cocaine during their high school years in the late 1980s. They sold $50 bags in the streets of Detroit. During those years they got bigger and bigger, and by the 2000s, they had established a large organization overseeing a multi-kilogram cocaine distribution cells in multiple states across the nation. Their cocaine business reached Alabama, California, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, Ohio, and Tennessee. Big Meech was the more social one of the brothers, so going into the music entertainment made sense for his characteristics, and Southwest T was more reserved and got mad at his brother for seeking that type of attention that he did. A big member of BMF, and was the co-founder of BMF and former partner of Big Meech, and Southwest T was Dexter Sosa Hussey, and was in charge of the logistics of trafficking hundreds of millions of dollars of cocaine across the country, as well laundering millions of dollars, and was there from the beginning way back in Detroit. They met through Sosa's sister, who was dating Meech at the time. He started working with Meech, and later met his brother Terry and another guy that later fell out of the picture, and they called themselves the 50 Boys as they sold $50 bags of crack cocaine. By the year of 2001, a dispute between Big Meech and Southwest E would pop up, and things were never gonna be the same again. Southwest T moved to LA to boss around there instead, while Big Meech was getting into the music business. But it wasn't until 2003 or 2004, they really had a falling out, and rarely spoke after that point. T's phones were wiretapped, and Southwest E spoke about their beef once on the phone, as he was talking to a federal inmate Shep. As he asked Southwest E how his brother was doing, T responded, "Losing his mind, man." Southwest E was worried that Big Meech was bringing a lot of unnecessary attention to them in their business. They barely talked after their fallout, and mostly stuck to their own side of the business. In Big Meech and Southwest E's relationship, they were always in competition, or more like Southwest E always competing with his older brother. They would often argue that would lead up to fist fights. They balanced each other out, and listened to each other as well, or they would never have gotten so far, but sometimes they would argue, and things would get so out of hand. When they were in LA together, that was the beginning of the end of their relationship with one another. They later went on a trip to Morocco with Puffy, and that is the trip where they had really fallen out. What was said or done was unknown. As for Big Meech, he went out to start his own promotion and record label in Atlanta, called the Black Mafia Family Entertainment. The purpose behind this is that Meech wanted to transition from the drug business to music business to eventually be a legitimate businessman, but also used it as a tool for money laundering. BMF became very successful, and Blue Da Vinci's album, World is BMF's, was nominated for a Source Award, which was a huge deal at the time for R&B and hip-hop music. BMF was ruling the nation's wholesale cocaine trade in the late 90s and early 2000s. BMF successfully became the most prolific and culturally significant urban drug trafficking network in American history. It was estimated that the multi-state organization cleared about $300 million in illicit profit. Southwest E took the name from another OG from Detroit as a way of paying tribute, but the original Southwest E didn't feel that way, as he was moving up the ranks, building his reputation, and apparently some of the women the original Southwest E was hanging with started to get attracted to the new Southwest E. The Southwest E of BMF later got shot in front of his baby mama's house, and the person shot at him through the window. The bullet grazed his eye, and he lost the eyesight of one eye, and it's rumored to be the original Southwest E who shot him, but is, according to Dexter Hussey, unknown, but that is the rumor. The injury to his eye led to a settlement, and with that paid settlement, Southwest E launched a car service in Detroit. Through that car service, they transported drugs. As for Big Meech, he fell in love with Atlanta and moved there in the early 90s. According to the authorities, all the coke that was distributed to Atlanta was from BMF at some point. The Black Mafia Family arrived at Atlanta and just took over the streets with their cocaine business. They had big labs in Atlanta as well, where they would cut the kilos and transported the coke to Miami, Detroit, St. Louis, New York, partially in South Carolina, Tennessee and LA. Things in Atlanta moved very smoothly for BMF, as they were able to bribe politicians and crooked cops and others inside the government as well. Some agents would give them information on what's going on in exchange for money. As for the lifestyle Meech and the BMF had was a special one, but that lifestyle wasn't always just glory and money and fancy cars. Violence and bumps came along the road as well. Back in 2003, the BMF from Meech's side, back when BMF Entertainment was starting to form as a label, were out partying one night in Atlanta. There was an altercation with Wolf and his best friend Rizzo. Wolf was previously Puffy's bodyguard, and as Wolf came to the club, upset as he was apparently dating this one girl that was hanging with BMF that night. Wolf apparently wasn't there prior, but was called there and later came. Wolf started acting up in the club, and the bouncers grabbed him and took him out of the club. Apparently Big Meech and the others were calm and tried to calm him down. Later that night, Big Meech and some others came outside, and as they were outside the club, they saw Wolf and Rizzo by Big Meech's car, leaning on it. Wolf and Rizzo later pulled out guns and started firing at them. Big Meech got shot in the butt, and Bulls was hit in the back of the leg. Someone at the spot returned fire at Wolf and Rizzo, resulting in their deaths. The night Wolf and Rizzo were killed became a turning point for BMF and practically changed everything. People started going crazy, and a lot of people got in trouble at that time period. BMF suddenly got a lot of bad attention in the media. Every bad thing happening in Atlanta at the time was blaming BMF. Another incident occurred in 2004 with the BMF member Daniel Fleming, aka Lil. He was at the Velvet Room in Atlanta, and as Fleming was backing out of a parking spot with a car, he almost hit Rash Hannibal Prince Drummond's car, and they all went out the car. Apparently someone from Drummond's crew started firing warning shots, hoping for Fleming and his guys to run away, but that wasn't the case. Fleming pulled up a gun and shot and killed Drummond on the spot. Right after the killing of Wolf, another killing happened that was blamed on BMF, and it is unknown if it was BMF, but at this point everything was pointing to BMF regardless. The year of 2005, all these things happening somehow pointed people to suspect BMF, which was bad for business, cause things were getting out of hand, which makes you question if putting the BMF name out there was a smart idea to begin with. But this was the out plan for BMF. This was the way they would transition from the drug business into being legitimate businessmen. But it didn't quite work out the way they wanted it to. Back in the year of 2005, there was this other party in Justin's, which is a club in Atlanta that was owned by Puffy. Bobby Brown's nephews, Shane and Kelsey, was there one night and got stabbed with an ice pick by Baby Blue, who is the younger brother of Blue Da Vinci. The nephews who got stabbed were allegedly stabbed in the neck, but luckily survived but got permanent disfigurement for it. A year later, Baby Blue was shot to death by his ex-girlfriend in Atlanta, and all of this was somehow increasing the suspicion towards BMF. At one point, Big Meech went to have a meeting with FBI agents and brought Sosa with him that time, and the meeting took place in Georgia. The agent they had met with apparently had some information that shocked Big Meech to his core. The agents showed him a tape recording of his little brother T talking to his mom and sister, saying that he wanted to kill Meech. Big Meech was shocked to hear that, even though they had their issues, that he would ever say something like that, or things had gotten so bad between them, because he loved his brother regardless of their differences. It had turned out that the authorities had 5 months of wiretaps on Southwest E, where he talked about how Big Meech should stop being so flashy or something would happen. He also talked about paying someone to do something about it, but didn't directly say kill at that point. The fact that there was wiretap on Terry was only indicating that things were gonna get worse for him. There were a lot of people willing to turn on Terry, and T talked about a lot of business dealings on the phone, and the evidence stacked up against him. The feds started investigating BMF already back in 2002 under an operation called Operation Motor City Mafia, and it was from there the feds tried building a case against the BMF. Apparently at one point a local crack dealer in Atlanta by the name of DeCarlo Hoskins, who had BMF as his supplier, and the phone of DeCarlo was wiretapped. The agents listened to his phone calls. In one of those phone calls, DeCarlo had a complaint from a customer. DeCarlo got some bad stuff from his supplier. 2 days later, the agents caught him setting up a major drug sale with 3 guys from out of town. As this drug sale was about to go down, the location was dropped, and the feds were ready. After the sale, DeCarlos drove off, and the police followed. DeCarlos was later pulled over, and as the police approached the car and searched it, they found 10 kilos of cocaine, and from the looks of the wrapping it was professionally done, probably cut once or twice only, since landing in the States. This was an indication that the feds were closer to BMF than they first imagined. 2 guys that supplied DeCarlos from BMF were Omari McCree and Jeffrey Lear. DeCarlos was caught by the police with 10 kilos of cocaine in 2004. As the cocaine was taken by the police, Omari and Jeffrey suddenly had a huge debt to BMF and ended up running away, and they allegedly started snitching. Omari was pointing out Meech as the supplier. Later during the year of 2005, towards the month of October, that's when the raiding was about to start, and about 30 BMF members were arrested that day, and seized $3 million in assets, cocaine, and a bunch of weapons. Right before those 30 were arrested, another 17 members were arrested, and seized 632 kilograms of cocaine, $5.3 million in cash. According to the authorities, BMF moved 2,500 kilograms of cocaine every month throughout the United States. Southwest E was one of the first ones to get arrested in St. Louis. As he was arrested, they found some weed, but found some weapons, and 12 phones as well. Big Meech decided to go back home to Detroit, setting things in order, as he knew and most of them knew the feds were coming. They partied in the local area, and went to meet up with some old friends and so on, and had the so-called Last Supper. After that, Meech went back to Atlanta, when he knew he shouldn't. Things were about to get rowdy, but the Mexican cartels found out about what was going on, and they offered Meech to hide him under their roof, and Sosa was ready to bring Meech down in Mexico. Meech had a chance to leave and escape, but refused as he wasn't willing to leave his family behind, because he knew if he left he would never come back. Even though Meech was arrested, the feds never actually had anything on him to begin with. As for evidence, it was all Southwest E. Due to the wiretaps, due to them being brothers, Meech was dragged in, but they didn't know that they weren't initially working together until later on. The brothers ended up with no bond, and were stuck in jail until further notice. After that, things got even crazier. The feds indicted 263 members, and there was an estimate of 25,000 people associated with BMF. The famous Jacob the jeweler got arrested as well for laundering money in his jewelry business. He wasn't registering high-value purchases that were paid with cash. As for Big Meech and Southwest E, they were both charged under the Continuing Criminal Enterprise Statute. The Continuing Criminal Enterprise Statute, commonly referred to as CCE statute or the Kingpin statute, is a United States federal law that targets large-scale drug traffickers who are responsible for long-term and elaborate drug conspiracies. Unlike the RICO Act, which covers a wide range of organized crime enterprises, the CCE statute covers only major narcotics organizations. 3 years after the indictment, the Flannery brothers were about to go to trial. Meech had tried to split his case from his brother's conspiracy, but failed. If the jury hadn't been there listening to all the evidence pile up against Terry, Meech might have had an easier time beating some of the charges, but since it didn't, it seemed like it was over for him at that point. Meech hired Jim Firebird as his lawyer, who was a high-priced one as well. Meech had known him for a long time, and thought Jim was his best chance in trial. Meanwhile, Terry took a public defendant, as he knew he was screwed already. Which was smart on D's end because they both ended up pleading guilty to the same charges, so all that money for nothing on Meech's side. The plea deal they both ended up taking was a 30-year sentence. But for Meech it was a bit complicated. Meech was originally looking at 12 to 15 years in prison, but they threatened him, as their sister and mother was caught in those wiretaps and saw them as complicity with Southwest E, wanting to give them time in prison as well for that. So ultimately Meech took that deal, and wasn't going to be a free man until 2032. In present time, Southwest E is basically a free man. He was released to home confinement May 5, 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, for health reasons, and will serve the remainder of his sentence in house arrest. Big Meech was trying to get that same treatment, trying to get released earlier on house arrest instead of serving his time in a federal prison. According to prosecutors, Meech doesn't deserve that same treatment, because Meech has a checkered disciplinary record. He has spent time in solitary confinement, illegally possessed a cell phone, and a small piece of a razor blade, while in prison, and has used intoxicants, according to court records. Big Meech argued that he is susceptible to COVID-19 due to his age and health problems, including hypertension and heart trouble. The story of Black Mafia Family is a legendary one. How they were two brothers coming off the streets of Detroit, starting off as these two local drug dealers, but built their way through the ranks and spread throughout the states, turning it into a $100 million business. Unfortunately split as brothers, and handled their own side of the business. Big Meech moved to Atlanta, and Southwest T moved to LA going about their own. Big Meech had a vision though, and that vision was to transition from the empire they had built, and build a new one in Atlanta as a legitimate businessman, starting up Black Mafia Family Entertainment, promoting and working with music artists like the legendary Young Jeezy. An empire that was eventually going to be taken down by the government. The operation succeeded, and this is the BMF that we know of today.